Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to IDTV, the home of all things digital marketing and freelance. I'm Ginny Nicholls, founder of Interim Digital and digital marketing freelancer veteran. And in this episode, we have a cracking topic for you: freelancer insurance. So you're probably thinking, why on earth do I need to even think about freelancer insurance? Because I'm just a copywriter, right? Or an SEOer. Unfortunately, not, because when you're a freelancer, you are running a business. So you need to make sure that you are covered for the unexpected, whether that is a PPCer who lets budget go wild on a PPC campaign, or even real life horror story, a copywriter that misses a typo that then goes to print on a ton of packaging. Really did happen. You need to make sure that you're covered for the unexpected. Luckily for you guys, though, I have had the most marvellous conversation with a lady called Ashley Baxter from a company called With Jack. Now, With Jack specialise in insurance to do with us, freelancers. All kinds of cover, what is covered, what isn't covered, everything you could possibly need to know about freelancer insurance. Ashley is your lady. So, if you're ready to up your freelancer game, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's dive into my conversation with the most marvellous Ashley Baxter from With Jack. Freelancer insurance. Simple, right? Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining me to talk all things about marvellous insurance. So for those that don't know, Ashley works obviously in insurance and specialises specifically within freelance, but is going to help us debunk some of the issues that come along with freelance, understanding of T's and C's, why we even need it, and a lot of the stuff of what it actually means, along with some real life examples. And I thought it'd be a great idea to get Ashley on because, not to sound derogatory, Ashley, but insurance can come across a little bit dull sometimes, a little bit overwhelming, especially in the freelance world. So to have someone like you who can help us understand what it is and why we need it would be amazing for our community. So welcome and thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Like you say, it's such a dry topic, but hopefully, because I have a lot of experience in insurance and then also almost a decade as a freelancer too, hopefully I can actually talk about it in a way that's quite relevant and a bit more interesting to freelancers.
Definitely. Awesome. Okay, well, do you want to start off by giving us a little bit of an intro? Because I know you used to be a freelancer, as you've touched on. So let's hear a bit more about you and your journey.
Okay, so I've been running with Jack for 8 years, but have actually been working in insurance for close to 20, which is
Wow.
crazy. And even though it does have such a bad reputation, it's one of my favorite things in the world. Like when it works, it's great. But I did also spend 8 years on the side as a freelance photographer. I mostly did weddings, but I also worked with a lot of commercial clients too. And I think my favorite one was when Glasgow City Marketing Bureau, which is the city I live in, hired me to do all of the imagery for the People Make Glasgow campaign. So that was tons of fun. But I did also have my fair share of difficult clients, and I think that that's kind of what's put me in this interesting position of understanding all of the insurance jargon and being able to talk to insurers and dissect the policy wording, but then also speaking about the relevant parts to freelancers and understanding what elements confuse them and also what fears they have in their day-to-day life as a freelancer. So I think that I have quite a unique perspective because of that.
Definitely. I think that's one of the really big parts of it, because even from interim's perspective, like we have insurance and being totally transparent with you, I got it as a knee-jerk reaction to be able to reply to a certain type of tender. I looked at what we needed, looked at who offered that and got it with just because it ticked those boxes relevant to a tender, as opposed to really understanding what it is and what it truly covers us for. So I think having someone like you break that down will be absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and that's super common. But hopefully with this, we're planting the seed where people are thinking, oh, that can happen to me. And they're kind of getting on top of things instead of just buying it to meet a contractual requirement. Not that there's anything wrong with that either.
No, definitely. Okay, well, let's crack on, shall we? So tell me a little bit about kind of popular insurance products when it comes to our market.
Okay, so I'm going to start with professional indemnity insurance. That's kind of our bread and butter, and it's a very complex product. I think if you look at the policy wording, it's something ridiculous like 20 to 30 pages. But
Right.
I like to simplify it by thinking of it as insurance for mistakes you might make in your work
Okay.
or problem clients. So this product is specifically related to the professional services that you provide as a marketer to clients that may lead to dissatisfaction with those services. So that might
Okay.
be you deliver work late, or a really good example that I think one of your community highlighted was they were asking what would happen if I accidentally overspent on an ad campaign.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of policy that would help you in an event like that. However, what's really important to highlight with professional indemnity insurance is that it's not there for you to go, oopsie, I've accidentally overspent on this ad campaign by, I don't know, £3,000. But don't worry, I've got insurance, so we'll just go and get the insurer to cover that extra cost. These
Yeah.
policies are designed to defend you. So the only way that your policy would be triggered is if the client tries to recover that money from you. So if they
Right.
say, this was your mistake, you've incurred this additional cost, we want you to cover the cost of that. So it's either triggered by a client trying to recover monetary damages or a threat of legal action. But like I say, very complex product. However, we can simplify it by thinking of it as insurance for mistakes you might make, problems that you might have with a client, and it's specifically in relation to the professional services that you provide to clients that may lead to them feeling unhappy with things.
Awesome. Okay. That makes absolute sense. And I've probably learned more about what that means in the last 65 seconds than I have in the last 15 years. So, so I think we're on to a winner.
Start then.
Excellent. Good. Thank you for that. So no, that is awesome. So, okay. So that was professional indemnity, right? Cool.
Yep. So
what's
the other
next
popular
on the hit list? Yeah.
So the other popular product we find a lot of freelancers buy is public liability insurance. You've probably heard of that as well. And this is specifically in relation to the physical side of your job. So anything that might cause a third party to sustain an accident or have an injury as a result of your work activities. Anything that leads to that person trying to recover compensation from you for, I don't know, a broken leg that they deem to be your fault. That's what public liability is for. Now, I'm going to be completely transparent with you here. And like I say, with Jack's been going for 8 years, we've never had a public liability claim. And that's because most of our customers are kind of the digital creative types. They work remotely. They're not dealing with heavy machinery, right? They're dependent on a laptop and a tablet. And they're also not, since many are working remotely, they're not really coming face to face with clients all that regularly. So there's very little risk there. However, we do find that a lot of freelancers add it to their policy because it's super cheap. I think it's like £2.80 a month. And you'll find, maybe in your case as well, when you talked about the tender, you'll find that it's a contractual requirement for a lot of clients. But we've yet to have a claim for it. So I'm not going to have any specific examples for you today, but hopefully I've still explained it in a way that you can understand, where it specifically relates to the physical side of your work, so a third party sustaining an accident or an injury. So think those slip and trip claims where they blame the freelancer and try to recover compensation from them. Did that make sense?
It did indeed, and actually that's helped my understanding for a real life example for us actually recently, whereby signing up with a new client, and our insurance covers us for £1 million of professional indemnity and public liability, and within their legal terms, we should have up to 5 million for PL, but now that I understand what that means, I can confidently say, well, we cover up to 1 million. So can that be a particular part of the T's and C's between us and them that we amend down to 1 million? So our £1 million worth of cover covers it, because the likelihood of our content writer causing someone to break their leg is highly unlikely. So would that be a fair understanding of it, or a fair way to apply that to a real life scenario from my understanding of it?
For sure. And I think it's really important actually to highlight this right now, that you and a lot of the people in your community will find that clients give you contracts that say we want X, Y, and Z insurance. And there's a reason why they're asking you to have insurance, and I respect that, obviously, as a broker.
100%.
But contracts are there to be negotiated. So if you do find that they're asking for a very high level of cover, when you understand what the products are and how they relate to you, for example, 5 million of public liability for, let's say, a freelancer who's just working from home behind their laptop, that's very extreme. Contracts are there to be negotiated. So don't be afraid to go back to your client and say, I'm happy to meet these terms, but we're going to need to compromise on the level of cover as well, because 5 million is going to be a lot more expensive than 1 million of cover, like I said, which was about £2.80 a month. So don't be afraid to negotiate with your clients on the insurance terms and their contracts.
Awesome, thank you. And that makes a lot of sense, and will make me more confident actually going into bigger tenders. And it's only generally the larger corporations that you deal with which have such stipulations when it is a tender process, but still it's awesome to have that in the back of your mind so you know what you're dealing with. So thank you.
Definitely.
So PIPL, next one, where are we up to?
So the other one I want to talk about is legal expenses insurance. And I hate the name of this product because it's so confusing. I mean, we've just talked about professional indemnity and how it can help you legally and financially deal with any claims brought against you. So people get confused. They're like, well, if my professional indemnity is going to help me legally, then why do I need this product that's called legal expenses?
Good question.
It's a completely separate product. And I like to think of it as a really great little add-on that you can bolt onto your insurance that's going to help you with things like you get access to a legal advice helpline. And what I love about that is that not every situation is going to escalate to the point where your professional indemnity insurance is triggered, because let's be real, those are for the very extreme cases. Sometimes there's just a little bit of a conflict or a little bit of a dispute and you want to get advice around it, or you want to understand what your rights are. Are you on the right side of things? So the legal advice helpline is great for that. It also includes legal documents, and in particular, we find our customers make use of the late payment templates the most, because there is actually a formal process to follow when chasing late payments. So there are the templates included in the legal documents dashboard. And then the other feature it has, which I love, is the debt recovery service, where a solicitor will chase your overdue invoices on your behalf. What I will say is that this product, again, is very cheap. It's about, the one that we arrange is about £5.90 a month. So you do get what you pay for. And what I mean by that is, when it works, when the debt recovery service works, it's the best thing in the world. But the policy does have some exclusions and clauses in there to be aware of. For example, there needs to be a 51% or greater chance of recovery. So if you're trying to get your invoice paid by a client that's maybe about to go out of business, it's probably it's not going to be covered because there's no money to recover. But it's a great little add-on that you can bolt onto your insurance, and I personally am a big fan of legal expenses insurance, despite the confusing name.
Definitely.
And lastly, I just want to quickly touch upon contents insurance. I'm not going to speak in too much detail because I think that's a really self-explanatory product. You know, it covers accidental damage, it covers accidental loss, and also theft. But it is our most used product in terms of claims. So I think being aware that it's so common for people to break things, you should ask yourself, do I have the capital to walk into a shop and replace my equipment that I'm dependent on
Yeah.
if anything were to happen to it? And if the answer is no, then it's definitely worth insuring your contents.
Nice. Okay. And that falls nicely into what one of our guys was asking around. Do they need a separate kind of contents or freelancer insurance alongside, when you open a bank account, you often get things like tech cover for, £9 a month or something that includes your mobile and your laptop or whatever it might be. Do we need both, or can we just get the contents via you, or talk to me through the difference between the two?
I like that question. So there is a difference. If
Okay.
you buy a business insurance policy for your contents, as opposed to like personal contents, home insurance,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, there's going to be some differences. So, for example, the policy that we arrange includes a lot of additional features which are really useful. For example, one of the ones that we've had several customers make use of is that the insurer will cover the cost of data recovery costs. So let's just say something happens
Okay.
to your laptop, suffers accidental damage, and the hard drive becomes corrupt and you've lost a lot of data on there.
Yeah.
Data recovery is so expensive. I think our cheapest claim with that has been just under £2,000, and they
Right.
tend to lean more towards like £4,000 or £5,000. So
Jeez,
it's really
okay.
expensive, and most freelancers would just write that off because we can't afford that.
Yeah.
So the business contents policy does have additional features. That one in particular is really useful. And also, you'll find that because it's business insurance, they tend to pay out claims quicker because they're aware
Ah,
that you're dependent on that equipment. Whereas my house got broken into a few years ago, PlayStation stolen, all sorts of things. And I think it took 3 weeks before I got any kind of money into my account. Whereas with really straightforward claims, we're aiming to get the money back into your account within just a few days. So
jeez,
there are
okay.
going to be differences between personal contents insurance and business contents insurance. And I do think that it's worth having business contents insurance in place because of that.
Nice. Okay, perfect. That again makes it really clear. So thank you for that. And I think that falls nicely into our next points around. It's all well and good understanding that the terminology, and you've done an amazing job for us to help kind of articulate that in a friendly way, as opposed to the stuff that we read in the documents. But when it really comes to life, and what really helps us, I think, anyone understand when you need something, is if you can hear real life examples of where stuff like this has happened. So can you talk us through some particular examples that would be relevant to our community, and so they can kind of picture why that cover is so important?
Yes, absolutely. And I will just say, just on the off chance that there are any with Jack customers listening to this thinking, that sounds like something I went through, and that they're thinking that I don't know, breaching some kind of data protection. We
Yeah,
get
yeah.
the same claims over and over again.
I bet.
So I am going to use popular examples, and I've kept them very generic,
Yeah.
just, out of respect for
Yeah. So
people.
don't
But
come
we
for
do.
Ashley if you watch this.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about professional indemnity, because those tend to be the largest claims that we get and the
Yeah.
scariest as well.
Okay.
So we had a marketer who was setting up online ads for their clients, and this client claimed that they had they'd created like an incorrect audience. So they'd been targeting people that actually weren't relevant to the client's business,
Okay.
and that the client had actually noticed, since that those adverts went live, they'd noticed a significant decrease in their revenue, and that they were actually attributing that loss of business to the freelancer. So they were basically
Okay.
saying, you set up these ads targeting the wrong audience. We believe that it's cost us X amount in loss of revenue, and because it's your mistake, we expect you to cover the cost of that.
Got it. Okay.
So we were very lucky with this, because um, the freelancer actually did have an audit trail of sending the audience to the client along with the ads and saying, can you take a look over all of this? Can you confirm that you're happy with everything? And then when you give me the green light, I'm going to put this live. And so we actually had proof of the client agreeing to that audience, which meant that it was a very simple claim. We didn't end up having to pay out any damages, but all we did was assist the freelancer in replying to the client, making sure they weren't going to say anything that increased their liability. But we have also seen other situations where there wasn't that written sign off from the client, in which case you would probably find that damages would have to be paid to the client. But what the insurer would do in that instance is try to negotiate and work with your client to lower the sum of money that needs to be paid. But even if they do have to pay anything to the client, that's irrelevant to the freelancer because their insurance covers that. So that's one example there. The other one I wanted to talk about, I don't know if I've included an example for a copywriter. So I'm not sure if you'd consider that marketing, but obviously marketers do deal with the written word a lot. So a copywriter made a typo on marketing material that went to print and nobody spotted it until it had actually been printed. And we are talking about tens of thousands of flyers. So it cost a few £1,000s to reprint the marketing material. And the client did want the freelancer to cover the cost of that because they were like, it's your mistake. And we've seen that happen quite a lot. And it's why it's really useful to get written sign off from clients before anything does go to print, just so that you can try to reduce your liability. But again, the insurer covered the cost of that. The only fees that fell to the freelancer were, of course, the policy excess, because whatever damages need to be paid, the insurer deducts the excess from that. The next example is probably one of our most common examples at the moment. These claims are on the increase, and it was that a marketer used third-party content in their marketing material without the correct copyright, without doing the right thing with licenses. So they were accused of copyright infringement. So what you have to be really mindful of is that obviously marketers use a lot of blog images and blog posts and social media content. And we generally find that most freelancers have a really good understanding of copyright infringement. But the problem is that they tend to use several different websites to source their images and bits and bobs from. And then when the copyright holder comes knocking saying, do you have a license for this? They are struggling to locate where they got the image from. They're struggling to locate the license. And the reason that these claims are on the increase right now is because there are actually websites out there that are solely dedicated to scouring the web and finding images that match their clients' images. And then they're sending the freelancers letters saying, you've infringed this copyright unless you can prove that you've got a license. And we're getting these claims quite a lot. And even though a license for an image only costs maybe £30, the claims tend to be for like a couple of £1,000, because they add up all the time that you've been using it, and then the fee that they add on for trying to recover the money from you and all sorts. So they can be quite expensive claims. I think there's only been 2 where we've been able to locate the license and put it to bed, but in most cases the insurer has had to end up paying the damages to the copyright holder, even if the freelancer did actually source it correctly at the time. My point is they're struggling to locate the license. So if you're listening to this and you are using third-party assets, my advice is to get really good at record keeping. Make a note of where you sourced it from, what license it was, did you purchase it? If so, keep your licenses in a wee folder in the cloud somewhere, because we're just seeing more and more of those types of claims. Nice. So Those three that I talked about are where your professional indemnity insurance would assist, but let's kind of give a wee example about the legal expenses product.
Yeah.
So we had a marketer whose client was ghosting them and therefore was not paying their invoice. And the reason they weren't paying was nothing to do with liquidation. They weren't going out of business.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything to do with dissatisfaction. There is unfortunately just some occasions where clients will ghost you to see if they can get away with it. It's really frustrating.
It's so true as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, super common. We get these types of instances a lot. And fortunately, that claim did satisfy all of the clauses in the insurance terms. And so the insurer did trigger the contract and debt recovery clause. However, because the invoice was fairly small compared to what it would cost to appoint a solicitor to chase the client and potentially even go to small claims court, they instead just decided to pay the value of the invoice to the freelancer, so they weren't out of pocket. And that kind of gets some mixed reactions, because even though it means that the freelancer wasn't financially out of pocket, sometimes that moral victory of getting the money from the client means much more than the money. But unfortunately, life is not perfect, and we were just very happy that he was able to get put back in the same financial position that he was expected to be in when he accepted the job. So those are some real life examples. Like I say, don't have any for public liability because we've never had we've never had a claim. And then contents insurance is very self-explanatory. So hopefully that did a good job of giving you some real examples.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the biggest thing for me that's come out of that is how important audit trails are, because it's all very well and good having the insurance, but if you want a claim to be smooth, then you've got to put the work in yourself to make sure that you've got the backup, and we can help you guys when we need your help as best we can.
Yeah, for sure. I actually do. Every insurer is different, but the insurer that we work with for certain professional services, and I think marketing might even be one of them, they do ask that you get client sign off on things before it's published. And it's not possible for everything, because sometimes clients just give you responsibility to manage their social media, and you're not going to run every tweet. We don't even call it tweets anymore, do we? X's? I don't know.
I don't know either.
That doesn't sound right. But it definitely helps to reduce the risk of a client saying you've done something that we're unhappy with. And it just helps to build, it makes it easier to build a defence for the freelancer if we can say, well, you signed off on this.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. But I guess we are human at the end of the day, and mistakes do happen. So in the instance whereby someone has accidentally, say, not put a budget cap on a PPC campaign or a social media campaign or whatever it is, and they've directly spent too much cash and it hasn't got, sometimes that goes well in PPC and we do actually see a nice return and the client goes, oh my God, I didn't realize if I spent that much I get a decent return. But let's say that hasn't happened and the client's gone, you spent way too much of my money, and we didn't sign off on that, and it wasn't signed off on that, it was a literal accident. What happens then?
Well, that's exactly what the professional indemnity policy is there for. It is there for negligence and mistakes, and so that would definitely fall within the professional indemnity cover. But just remember that it's fully dependent on your client asking for you to cover the additional costs that you incurred. If they just say to you, look, this has happened and we're not happy with it, then what I would do if I was a freelancer who was insured and had the legal expenses product, I would use the legal advice helpline to be like, I've kind of made this mistake and my client's unhappy, and maybe just get a little bit of advice around how to reply to the client or how to handle the situation. But until they either bring legal action against you, which they probably wouldn't do in that case, or try to recover the additional costs that they've incurred because of your mistake, then your professional indemnity insurance wouldn't be triggered. So it's fully dependent on them saying, we're not happy, you've made this mistake, and we expect you to financially
to pay it back.
Fix that mistake. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you, because I think, in the SEO camps and the content writing example is absolute gold, because we have a lot of content writers in our community, and I'm not sure if that would have even been something that they would have thought about. Certainly not something I've ever thought about. And having worked with content writers for years, it wouldn't even cross my mind that kind of thing they'd be come for or come to get that rectified. So yeah, I think that's great to have that kind of real life example, because for PPCers it is different. As an SEO and a content writer, you're not holding someone's actual cash. Like, even if it's on a credit card, we're still responsible for someone's physical cash leaving their business, and ideally returning them physical cash back into the business via ways of sales or leads. And if accidents do happen like that, it's good to know that there's some form of backup in those situations if triggered.
Yeah, for sure. I think like one of the things that I really liked when I was speaking to an ex-customer, because she's no longer freelancing, recently she said to me, because she had a few issues, she was a marketer, she had a few issues with some clients, and she said to me, what I really liked about my insurance was that it was more of a feeling for me. She said, she said, I may have never had to have actually triggered, like my policy was never triggered, but she said it was a feeling of knowing who to turn to when things went wrong. And that's why I think it's nice to have that legal advice helpline, because you can get an outsider's perspective of the situation, but they're also going to have a legal understanding of your rights, and it can kind of give you a bit more confidence to equip you better to have that difficult conversation with your client, basically.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've had that where I've had difficulty with clients, and and it's become in my brain the biggest thing ever. And then the second I speak to a lawyer, or a legal expert, should I say? Sorry, it's such small fry to them, because they deal with it all day, every day. So even them taking that mental load off you because they understand it and it's all they do, you're like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And I've got someone who can help me with this. And, for you, it feels like this gigantic mountain. For them, they're like, yeah, we deal with that kind of stuff all the time. So don't worry about it. We'll sort it. And it's just that relief that comes with it is incredible.
100% spot on.
Nice. Okie doke. So, really awesome insights and really applicable stuff to us, which I think is amazing. A few of our community members and interim as well, starting to more so, happen to work with international clients. So I'd say mostly relevant for us is kind of US, a little bit of Australia, and some European countries as well. So talk us through that. How does insurance work with the international crowd?
Okay, so just to make things more complicated, because it's insurance, every policy is different. So definitely, if you already have insurance, then you will need to check your schedule, your insured schedule, to see what jurisdiction your policy covers. But I can say on very good authority that pretty much every single professional indemnity policy will exclude US and Canada jurisdiction. So that means that if you're working with clients in the US or in Canada and they bring a claim against you and it's handled under their, let's just say Maryland law, because every state has a different law as well, that it wouldn't be covered. So you have two options. What you can do is you can either extend your jurisdiction, your policy jurisdiction, to include worldwide. Most insurers will do this, but it's going to cost you a lot of money, because the reason that insurers exclude US jurisdiction by default is because their data shows them that in the US, people are a lot quicker to sue you if they're not happy with something. Whereas in the UK, we tend to we like to talk about things and try to sort it out. But in the US, apparently, they are very quick to sue. And so the insurer does take that into consideration when pricing for US jurisdiction. So expect to pay a lot more money, like definitely several £100s more than what you already pay. But the other option, which is cheaper, but maybe a little bit riskier, but the other option is to ensure that when you're working with US clients or Canadian clients or any clients that your policy jurisdiction doesn't cover, that you make sure that they're entering into your contract that explicitly states that any any disputes are going to be handled under UK law. So they'll be handled in English courts or Scottish courts. And that means that even if the client's based in the US, if there is a dispute that escalates to involving legal action, that it's going to be handled in the UK and that will be covered. But if you go down that route, my advice would be to definitely get a contract lawyer to either review your existing contract or create one from scratch, because you need to be watertight there. But those are your two options. Either way, it's going to cost you a little bit more money if you're wanting to protect yourself working with US clients.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes total sense. And within the legal expenses cover, can you have your own contracts reviewed by them, or is that out of scope?
That's a good question. So there are a few different legal expenses providers in the UK. It's very small niche. I think there's only like 3 or 4. I think some of them do offer that as an additional service, but you would need to pay for it. The company we use doesn't offer that, but we have a little bit of a deal with a contract lawyer who, off the top of my head, the prices that they said were £250 for a contract review, £350 for creating one from scratch. That's off the top of my head. So if that's of interest, then if that's of interest, then people can get in touch and I'll do an intro. But I do think it's a good idea, if you're getting clients to sign your own contracts, which you should be, to make sure that it's all well and good to use a template off the internet, but I think it's worth investing a couple of £100 to tweaking it to benefit you. Oh, and also just a little tip there. What I like to tell my customers to do if they do have a contract created from scratch, or if they do have a contract review, is to think about the parts of your work that really concern you. And then tell the lawyer, tell the solicitor, this is what keeps me up at night. Is there anything we can include in the contract to reduce my risk there? I just think that's a good way of going about creating a contract.
It's funny you say that, because we're literally in exactly that process of having everything reviewed by a proper legal support system, and that is exactly what they told us, was to come to them with a few bullet points of yes, there's all the standard contractual stuff, but when it comes to interim and your clients and interim and your freelancers, what are the things that are the most important to you? So it's great to hear that from you too. Excellent tip.
Yeah, thanks.
I guess that, in fact, that leads us very nicely into confidence as a freelancer and confidence in your paperwork, confidence in your insurer, etc. Because I know that when we've gone through this process and it's all completed and we've had a refresh of everything, I can sit securely knowing that the legal guys, the insurers, have got everything that interim needs for me to just crack on and not worry about it. And if it's there, if I do need to pull on it, then I can. As and when needed. So talk us through a bit more around the confidence you can create within freelancers because of the types of insurance you guys offer.
So I feel very strongly about this. I truly believe, because I've seen it over and over again and then experienced it myself as a freelancer, that being insured. So what we tend to find with relationships with freelancers and clients is that unfortunately sometimes it feels like there's a bit of an imbalance. Like freelancers kind of are like, feel very dependent on their client. Oh, they're paying me, so I need to do everything. But my boundaries and everything go out the window because I just want to make this client happy, and then it'll potentially lead to repeat work, or they'll tell other clients about me. So there does sometimes feel like there's a bit of an imbalance. What I think being insured does is actually give you some of the power back, because it equips you to handle confrontations better. You should be going into projects with more confidence, knowing that you can have difficult conversations with clients. And I'll give you a specific example of something that happened to myself. When I was a freelancer, I did a job for a client who was very, very unhappy with my photos, even though they were great. And it was a really sickening experience. There's nothing worse than having a client unhappy with your work. And they had emailed me like an essay of everything that they were dissatisfied with.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I worked with them to try to come to a compromise, like, well, I can do this differently, we can edit some things differently, just trying to reach a conclusion. And it turned out, it became very clear that this client was just angling for a full refund. Like,
Get
all
you.
they wanted was for me to
Oh,
go, here's your money back. And I see
yeah,
this all the time now that I'm an insurance broker. We see it all the time where clients are being difficult, they're being threatening, and they're full of hot air, but all they're doing is trying to intimidate and bully you into giving them
yeah,
a refund.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if I wasn't insured, if I didn't understand how my policy worked, I can assure you that I would have actually given that client their money back and said, like,
Mm-hmm.
here you go. I never want to speak to you again.
Yeah,
Like, you've been the bane of my life for the past few weeks. But because I was insured, it gave me the power to actually back my client into a corner and say to
nice.
them, well, I've done everything that you've hired me to do, and I've done it to a very good standard.
Mm-hmm.
I have adhered to all of my contractual obligations, and I've
Yeah.
even tried to work with you to reach a compromise. I
Mm.
don't see what else we can do here. And
Yeah.
I was forcing them into making a decision. And really, they only have two decisions. One is that they go, okay, fair enough, let's just leave it at that. Or the other is that they say, well, we're really not happy. You'll be hearing from our legal team. Fine, that's why I
Yeah.
have insurance. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm telling you now that 9 times out of 10, that client is going to go, right, okay, then we'll just leave it at that. And my
Yeah.
client did come back to me and say, okay, like, we'll just call it a day.
Mm.
And it was in that particular moment when that happened that I realized that I never had to use the practical side of my insurance, which was the
Yeah.
legal help, the insurer getting involved and having to pay damages. But I benefited in that moment from my policy because that job was worth maybe 3 to 4 times what I paid for my insurance. But my insurance is what gave me the confidence to have that conversation with the client, and it more than paid for itself. And that's
Yeah.
when I realized just how much being insured can help you be a confident freelancer.
Yeah. I think that's absolute gold because to know that it's unfortunately as a freelancer there are chances out there. There's one thing negotiating for lower rates or extended payment or whatever it is. There's another thing being a chancer, and unfortunately, nature of the beast, especially, and I hate to say this and generalize, so don't come for me, but it's often the smaller owner managed brands that you work with who are the ones who are prepared to shove you to the bottom of the pile, get you to drop your rates instantly, do everything for the longest hours, biggest return for littlest investment, etc. And then icing on the cake is they don't pay anyway. So there
Yeah.
are unfortunately people like that. I think as you become, well, the longer you're in freelance, I'm sure you found this as well. Your radar for BS starts to get a bit more in tune, so you can spot or try to spot some of the red flag clients a bit earlier on. But for new freelancers, especially, and for any freelancers, it can unfortunately happen. So just to have those insurance anecdotes in the back of your brain to be able to pull out of the catalogue without even making a claim to then get your money is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. You can do everything right. You can be the best in your field, but there's unfortunately just some very predatory clients out
Yeah,
there. Even
that's a
more
great
so
term.
when it comes
Yeah,
to working with freelancers, they think, oh, I'm just working with like somebody who's, sitting at home. It's a one person business. I can bully them. I can intimidate them.
yeah,
But what they don't really consider is that a lot of times the freelancer has insurance, therefore they have a team of people behind them to help them
yeah.
stand up to predatory clients like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good term. I've never called it that, but I think as kind of damning as it is, I think that's such an accurate label for some clients out there, which is
Yeah.
really unfortunate. But no, I think that makes total sense. So yeah, so thank you very much for running through all of that. I certainly feel a lot more reassured in terms of knowing what to say, knowing what everything means, and having that, as you say, a team. I think that I hadn't realised that the legal expenses element comes with access to a legal advice line, which is amazing. I know not necessarily all, or do all policies include that with the legal expenses?
They all do.
Okay.
It's just that insurers are not good at marketing their own products. Insurers need to hire. They just like bury all this stuff in the documents, and therefore that's why I think it helps to work with brokers who are more specialised in that niche, because we've picked up on that stuff basically. But yeah, you will find that all legal expenses insurance does have that.
That's amazing. And I think, it's not dissimilar to working as a freelance. You're plugging in expertise as and when you need it from the relevant people. So it's just like having that back of your mind support, or I'm not quite sure about that, or does it really cover that, or what if, all of those what ifs that, you and I sit at home and soundboard to our dogs about this kind of stuff. Like if I could actually, tap into a legal expert or an insurance expert who can give me the right kind of advice, then absolutely amazing. So yeah, so that sounds amazing. And thank you for clarifying so much. So if you could leave our community with one piece of, or one tip when it comes to insurance off the back of this call, what would you leave them with?
So what I would really like your audience to do next time they work with a client, so let's just say you're about to onboard a new client, assuming that they are a UK limited company, I would like for you to either, you can do this yourself or I can do it for you for free. I would like you to actually run a credit check on your client, because what you will find is that in some cases, everything comes back super vanilla, and that's fine. That means you've not got much cause for concern. But sometimes you can see things like this client actually has a history of CCJs against them, which implies that they are poor at paying on time. And then that can make you, that can sort of give you a bit of a head start in terms of maybe sorting out your legal expenses insurance, because like I say, that has your debt recovery service. So you can go, okay, this client I'm about to work with, they seem to have a history of non-payment or poor payment. So I'm just going to get my legal expenses insurance sorted so that if that does happen, I have a bit of help there. And another thing you can look for when you're doing a bit of due diligence on your client, and this is based on our claims data, is if they're VC backed, check where they're at in their funding cycle, because if they have maybe last raised 2 years ago, then we have noticed from our claims data that they're probably in the middle of or about to start raising their next round of funding. And this can lead to cash flow issues, which unfortunately is always the freelancers that suffer at the hands of the people that they're working for, is cash flow. So again, just if you're aware of that, it means that you can get your insurance in place to help you deal with that problem before it happens. Because remember, you can't buy insurance to help you with something that's already occurred. It needs to be in place before the problem happens. So I think my takeaway is to just do a little bit more due diligence on your clients if possible. I can help with that if you're not sure what to look for. And that can really highlight what insurance products you should have in place before working with them to help you deal with any problems should they arise.
Amazing. And it's actually that part about the VC funded kind of checking where they are in that investment journey is so applicable to freelancers, because the amount of startups that partner with freelancers because they haven't got the cash to onboard, a full-time marketing team, is actually, from a freelancer's perspective, quite a sweet spot of clientele to go after. But that is a really interesting tip to look at, because there's nothing worse, and I've had it said to us before, oh yes, the funding is just about to be released, or we're just in the process of raising the funding, and it's like, instant red flag, because if that cash isn't in the bank, likelihood of me seeing any of it is zero.
Yeah, 100%. And that information is publicly available, so there's nothing stopping us from checking that. So in terms of funding, you can see when a company last raised funding on Crunchbase. So just to put that out there as well, for anybody that is working with VC-backed startups, check Crunchbase to see when they last raised, just to help inform your decisions about not even taking out insurance, but that can even inform your decisions about how you structure your payments. Because if you see that, like we say, somebody might be in the middle of raising their next round of funding, you're a little bit worried about whether they have the cash flow to pay you, then maybe you change your payment terms from a 40% deposit to a 70% deposit, so that you'd at least get guaranteed 70% of the project money. So it's just things to think about like that.
Amazing. That makes an awful lot of sense, as has everything you said today. So thank you for that. Which is always handy, isn't it? So with Jack, tell us a bit about with Jack. Where can people find you, and whereabouts are you online?
So we are at withjack.co.uk. We offer all of the products that we've talked about today, and we do have policies specifically for marketers, so hopefully that makes us a good fit for what your audience is looking for. We're on social media as, let me get this right because I have a hyphen or I have an underscore in there. I think it's underscore with Jack on Instagram and X. But I'm more leaning towards updating Instagram these days because X just seems to have kind of fallen off a cliff in terms of quality. But certainly go to the website withjack.co.uk. And one thing that I'm trying to do right now is actually create a new product to help freelancers with late payment and non-payment. So if any of your audience has any experience with late or non-payment and they're happy to talk to me, maybe they can just reach out to me at hello@withjack.co.uk.
Amazing. That is excellent. And I'll link all of that in the bio below anyway when we upload it to the website. So whether it's underscore or hyphen, we'll work it out before then. So thank you, Ashley. It's been awesome speaking to you. Really, really insightful. Helps debunk a load of stuff with insurance and actually make it non-boring. So thank you for that. And for any of our community members who want to get in touch, we'll make sure that all of your details are in the bio. So thank you very much.
Thank you.